I am pleased to be here on this occasion, and I thank the conference organizers for inviting me to this occasion and to give me enough time to talk about this delicate subject. That would help me to give a background about the subject, which I originally have skipped. I will talk about natural causality, presenting views of Mu'tazilites and Ash'arites. I will try also to compare both views, and I should tell you that, in fact, my contribution to the workshop plus the conference is composed of 3 parts. This is part 1, where only the views are presented without analysis. Part 2 will be the analysis of the views, and part 3 will be the relation to modern quantum mechanics. The common understanding is that Ash'arites have championed the occasionalist approach to causality, and that they have denied all sorts of causal relationships. We will see that this is not quite accurate. We also have to, I will discuss, I will have a word about Al-Ghazali. Al-Ghazali now has been read in 2 versions. One, Al-Ghazali, who is the occasionalist, a typical occasionalist, Abu Hamid Al-Ghazali, and in another reading, especially after we see the book of Frank Griffel, we can find that there is another reading by which Al-Ghazali is presented as a causalist rather than an occasionalist, but with a different meaning for causality. So, to understand the problem, in my opinion, we have to differentiate between 2 things. We have to differentiate between causal relationships and causal determinism. Perhaps this is a new approach to the problem of causality. It's a new approach to understand the concept of causality in Islamic philosophy, especially in Islamic Kalam. We were perhaps overwhelmed by Orientalist studies, which tells us that mutakallimun are occasionalists, and mainly the Ash'arites. During the last 25 years, engaged with Kalam and mutakallimun, I can assure you that there are many inaccurate descriptions for people, concepts, and even arguments in some cases, in books and in articles published during the last 100 years or so. So in my opinion, we need to rectify these conclusions and to get into the real matter as presented in thoughts of those peoples. We would be able to know that if we can identify the structural system of their thoughts. And this I will come in the second part when I go into analysis. But as I said, in this part of my contribution in this occasion is only to present the ideas in support of the claim that, my claim, that the Mutakallimun, Ash'arites and Mu'tazilites, had similar views concerning natural causality. They have different views concerning human causality, which I am not discussing. The main difference between Mu'tazilite and Ash'arite was on the question of human causality. The myth that the Mu'tazilite were advanced rational thinkers is much exaggerated. We will find that their look, their view, their understanding of natural causality is very similar to the Ash'arite, except that they have presented new terms, a new in-depth understanding, new definitions which the Ash'arites found unnecessary. So most of the Mu'tazilite, I can say, agree with the Ash'arites, although the Ash'arites was developed after, as we know, the Mu'tazilites. The question of natural causality is directly related with the acknowledgement or denying acts of inanimate matter, intrinsic efficacy. This is the main question. Whether inanimate matter has the ability, the qualification and ability. Well, ability is different from qualification. Whether it has the ability, let us say, to effect a cause. Because the ability means power, means will, means determinism for something. So this is the main question. Here we have to tackle the question of deterministic causal effects and non-deterministic causal effects. And when you go to details, the very, very details between the differences between Ash'arite and Mu'tazilite, you find that they differ to some extent on these two terms. Well, may I also present the, before discussing the Mu'tazilite views, I should say few words about Mutakallimun. Mutakallimun were a group of thinkers. They were known in the 8th century already. Grown up into a larger group in the 9th and 10th century. They wrote a lot of manuscripts. They taught in mosques, of course, and madrasas. And they developed their theory, what I call the Islamic philosophy of or the Islamic approach to natural philosophy. They developed their approach, the Islamic approach to natural philosophy. They were divided into two groups. The first group was called Mu'tazila. In fact, three groups, but then you can consider the third as a sort of a version for the second. The first group is Mu'tazilites, led by Wasil bin Ata, who was, I think, he died in the 8th century, late 8th century, and then followed by Abu Hudayl al-Allaf, Abu Ali al-Jibai. These are actually eras. Abu Hashim al-Jibai, and then the Asharite was born about 200 years after the Mu'tazilites started their preaching, led by Abu al-Hasan al-Ash'ari. This is another group. As I said, the main problem between Ash'arite and Mu'tazilite was the act of man. It's nothing to do with rationalism, actually. It's something to do mainly with the responsibility of man for his acts. The Mu'tazilite insisted that man is responsible for his acts. Therefore, we should attribute causal effects to his own doing or misdoing. Asharite said, no, since God created everything, therefore acts of man has been created by God. And man cannot act on his own, by his own full will. But he can always acquire, and this is called acquisition, theory of acquisition. He acquires certain benefits or of his doing, or the bad, say, reputation for his misdoing. He only acquires. And here there is also a detailed definitions and studies that has to be done in order to present their ideas properly. Otherwise, the Mu'tazilites are no more rational than the Ash'arites, as far as I can see. There are prominent names among Mu'tazilites. The founders, Abu Hudayl al-Allaf, who is the father of atomic theory, Islamic atomism. He is the father of recreation principle, continual recreation. Somebody asked me why you say recreation. It's continual or continuous recreation, what I mean. Abu Hudayl al-Allaf died 935, as far as I remember. Then you have, maybe 800, I'm sorry, it's 835, I think. He died, so. Abu Hudayl was one of the very famous founders of the Mu'tazilite. Then you come to the era of Qadi Abd-Jabbar. Not many corpus, not many manuscripts has been left from the time of Abu Hudayl al-Allaf, Wasil ibn Ata, and that group, the founders, the leaders, the pioneers of Mu'tazila. The second period, which is the period of Qadi Abd-Jabbar, who died in 1024, and his disciples, his students, Al-Naysaburi, Abu Rashid al-Naysaburi, Ahmed al-Hasan ibn Mataway. These, they contributed a lot to documenting the ideas, concepts, arguments of the Mu'tazilites. Al-Ash'ari, who is the founder of Ash'arism, has also contributed in large part to the heritage, to the legacy of the early Mu'tazilites. Yes. And their opponents, of course. Among the early Mu'tazilites, we have, you can call them dissident Mu'tazilite, like Ibrahim al-Nadham and Muammar ibn Abbad al-Sullami. They have slightly different views from the Mu'tazilite in concern with natural causality. I will come to that later. So my sources of views is based mainly on the writings of Al-Qadi Abd-Jabbar for the Mu'tazilite, in his book Al-Muhit bit-Taklif, and his encyclopedia of Mu'tazilite called Al-Mughni fi Abwab al-Adl wa-Tawheed. As far as I know, there are about 14 volumes, which has been discovered in Yemen during the 40s of last century. And then it was edited in Egypt. It's still in Arabic. You have also the Al-Khayyat in his book Al-Intisar. He has many quotations from sayings of Al-Nadham, Ibrahim al-Nadham. We have also Abu Rashid al-Naysaburi, as I said, in his book Masail al-Khilaf بين البغداديين والبصريين, or بين البصريين والبغداديين, different views of Basrinian Mu'tazilite and Baghdadi Mu'tazilite, because Mu'tazilite were also divided into two main groups: Baghdadi, those who are living in Baghdad, studied in Baghdad, and the Basriyan who lived in Basra. What does the Mu'tazilite say about natural causality? As I said, they acknowledge causal relationships but deny causal determinism. And this is how it should be put, in my opinion, in order to understand what's going on. They defined three main types of causal relationships. The first one is adherence, i'timad, and it concerns with natural effects. Then you have generation, tawlid. I will come to this in more details. And that concerns with natural and human effects. And then you have the custom. Many people believe that custom is only exclusively related to the Ash'arites. It's not true. This is inaccurate. We have explicit acknowledgement of custom, al-'ada, by Qadi Abd-Jabbar and by al-Naysaburi. They also have, to less extent, included iqtiran as a causal relation, as a causal relationship. But for causal determinism, I assure that the Mu'tazilite, except al-Nadham and Muammar, all Mu'tazilite did not acknowledge causal determinism. Al-Ash'ari tells us that Abu al-Hudayl al-Allaf, he died 850, and Abu Ali al-Jibai died 916, which is the second phase of Mu'tazilite, a leader of the second phase of Mu'tazilite, al-Jubbai, actually. It should be pronounced al-Jubbai. That they allowed for a free stone to remain suspended in air, standing still, and accepted bringing together fire and cotton without effecting burning, explicitly. That were the leaders of Mu'tazilites. And this is the quotation from the Maqalat al-Islamiyyin wa Ikhtilaf al-Musallin, page 212, edited by Ritter. As for collating a heavy stone and air for long without effecting a downfall, but creating steel, and collating fire and cotton without creating burning, but the contrary has been allowed by Abu al-Hudayl and the Jubba'i and many of the Mutakallimun. Combined with their invention of the notion of recreation, which will be discussed later also, this indicates at least that the early Mu'tazilites were champions of occasionalism. Let's go back to the three, to the adherents, i'timad and tawlid or tawallud, and discuss this. As I said in the beginning, we should go to the main expressions by which we can recognize whether they accept natural determinism or not. Let's go to the so-called nature, al-tab' in Arabic, al-tab'. In his book, Masail al-Khilaf, al-Naysaburi reports that Abu al-Qasim al-Ka'bi, the exponent of Baghdadi Mu'tazilite of his time, acknowledged the four natures. But this is the Baghdadi Mu'tazilite. Acknowledged the four natures, despite that God is capable of creating the world not from these natures. But then we know that Al-Naysaburi denied the existence of the intrinsic properties that cause the subsequent event which are attached to that property. He says, our masters believe that the taba, his master is Qadi Abd-Jabbar, taba is irrational, and God is able to turn wheat as is into barley, and is able to create from the sperms of a human any other animal. And we don't say that he has created man from the four basic elements. Clear. Al-Naysaburi presents several arguments in refutation of the claim of the existence of and action of taba. These arguments are very similar to those which was brought earlier by the Ash'arite Abu Bakr al-Baqillani. In fact, I have noticed that they are using Qadi Abd-Jabbar and his students, Naysaburi, they are using the same argument, the same examples which were used by Baqillani about 50 or 60 years before them. Al-Baqillani has a very famous book, Tamheed al-Awail wa Talkhis al-Dalail. He expressed his views in this respect, and he has a whole chapter devoted to discussing al-Taba wa al-Tabi'a, the nature and the nature of things. And he presents examples for their views. The same examples has been used by Mu'tazilite. Arguments of Abdul Jabbar, between two brackets, or Ibn Mataway, because some people, including Mehmet Bulgan, believe that the book Muhit bit-Taklif could be attributed to Ibn Mataway, not to his master. But nevertheless, they are the same madrasa. They have similar views to Al-Baqillani, as I said. Whereas Al-Nazzam, who is known to be a rationalist, and in Arabic writings, some writers consider Al-Nazzam as the first communist, maybe the first materialist philosopher in the world, etc., etc. Al-Nazzam himself believes in God and believes in the power of God to turn everything into whatever he likes. And he says, Al-Nazzam was known to have adopted the efficacy of Taba. We find Al-Ash'ari reporting that Al-Nazzam has assumed that there is a sort of nature inherited by the Creator in things to have or to behave as they do. And here it makes a difference, yes. He is allocating. He says, Al-Khayyat, for example, who reported much of Al-Nazzam, saying, all the books of Al-Nazzam, by the way, are lost. None of his book has been saved till this time, but at least there are some quotations from him. If it was for water to flow, then it is in the capability of Allah to stop it. That's what Al-Nazzam is saying. And if it is for the heavy stone to fall, then it is for Allah to prevent it from doing so. Therefore, if you like, he may be acknowledging the occasionalist again, the occasionalist view by saying this, because then he will be attributing the real cause to Allah. Alluded by Ash'ari, saying that Al-Nazzam has said that whatever happens out of the direct action of human, it should be attributed to God by the necessity of its creation. Collectively, this could mean that Al-Nazzam too effectively denied deterministic causality. So Taba, nature, has been negated by the Mu'tazila. Clear. The second one is i'timad. I'timad is a sort of adherence or devotion that some states of entities enjoy. That is according to Al-Jurjani definition in his book Al-Ta'rifat. I'timad was widely discussed term among the Mu'tazilite, and it is much related to another term which is tawlid or tawallud, generation. We have two types of i'timad. اعتمادات لازمة, اعتمادات لازمة, compulsory or mandatory adherence, and اعتمادات مجتلبة, generated. When I push this piece of plastic upwards, it goes up because of the اعتمادات مجتلبة, the produced or adherence. I give it a push. But then it reaches a point where it stands still for a moment, an instantaneous V equal to 0, and then falls. Falling back to earth, back to ground, is brought by i'timadat lazima. Force of gravity is i'timadat lazima. Also, if you blow a sack and put it in water, the water will push the sack to be floating. And this is also i'timadat lazima. So you see, they do not call it natural i'timadat. They call it lazima. Because they don't acknowledge natural and nature. There is no question of natural efficacy. The more complicated question of i'timadat was in discussing the cotton and fire. They also have adhered that to adherence, the burning of cotton. And it strikes me that they discussed actually in an unclear way. This could be easily an MSc thesis, a very good MSc thesis, to see what Ibn Matawi and Nisaburi, Abu Rashid, were thinking of temperature and heat, because they clearly say we have to differentiate between heat and burning. They don't use the word temperature, they use burning, but they mean temperature apparently. Somebody has to study this. It's worth it. It's quite worth it, I feel. By bringing these ideas, i'timad, tawlid, they were accused of being naturalists by the Ash'arites at their time already. And they said, no, we are not. Here, An-Naisaburi says that it is not the case. If it is said, it is not that for the i'timad which you assign to determine what it does deterministically. We say, we seek refuge in Allah. نلجأ إلى الله في هذا القول. This is a big accusation which we don't accept. We don't say that nature behaves deterministically. That's what he means to say. So we complain to Allah. Qadi Abd Jabbar discussed the i'timad and in Muhit bit-Taklif clearly, and he says, when discussing naturalists, he says, and when the philosophers, when they, he means the naturalists, mean by taba', he is negating taba', of course, what happens from burning fire, so it is that what we consider to happen out of adherence, i'timad. And then he says, we attribute all these events, means, to an actor who is free and able to prevent such generation and response. Yeah, this has been repeated perhaps here. Then, the important piece of where I said that they acknowledge custom. However, if they won't include in this description what happens when drinking wine, we say that this is understood to follow the custom, عادة, and Allah's effects it without having a requiring order. Since if it was for drinking to effect getting drunk, it would be done without with the drinking water too. So it's the natural effect. Any other thing could lead to the same result. That confirms that it is independent of the cause. I'm quoting Abd-Jabbar, of course, and nature, and instead it follows the custom. Continuous recreation. You know, many of you are familiar with the idea of recreation. Mu'tazilites, mainly Abu al-Hudayl, the leader of Mu'tazilite, said that God, in order to maintain supremacy of God and his sustainment of the world, they invented this idea that the atoms are composed of two parts. What they call the substance, al-jawhar, I don't call it substance, and Richard Frank has already made a note about that what we call a substance is not a substance in the Aristotelian understanding, and what we call accident is not accident of Aristotelian understanding. Therefore, I call it jawhar and arad with this original meaning. The atom, the Islamic atom, is composed of two parts, the jawhar and the arad. The jawhar, if you dig in the concept, you find it is an abstract entity. The jawhar. It can't stand alone. You cannot catch a jawhar on its own. And then you have the arad. The arad comes to define the jawhar, to give it an ontological existence. So the atom, the Islamic atom, is ontology, but composed of two parts. One abstract, the other is epistemology. This is how they combine to form an ontological entity. The Arab has been apparently introduced in order to maintain the power of God on the world by being recreating this Arab. So the jawhar, the substance, is there always, but it is only abstract. You cannot catch it on its own. The Arab comes and joins this substrate or the abstract jawhar and compose something which you can deal with, the atom. To form a body is another question. They had different ideas. One said two jawhar, two atoms will compose a body. Some said 8 or 16. In any case, this kind of recreation of the Arab, the properties, the attributes of things, leaves no space for deterministic effect. Since who is creating the Arab, these properties can change them anytime he likes. This is occasionalism in the proper meaning, in my opinion. So now I don't call it anymore occasionalism, by the way. I suggest we should call it indeterminism. because occasionalism gives you wrong impression. It gives unordered, no law, while in fact Mu'tazilah and Asharite believe that there is a law. The thing is that they believe also that this law might be breached by the Creator. That's the only thing. And this is very important, by the way. On occasion, on other occasions of discussing science and religion debates, I have been present several conferences, and I found that most atheist physicists, eminent physicists like Steven Weinberg, Lawrence Krauss, Stephen Hawking, they are denying the existence of God for one good reason for them, that a world ruled by a God should be miraculous. Occasionalists. That's what they think. But when you tell them this is not true, for example, Lawrence Krauss, who is very famous nowadays in the United States, he says, well, I'm ready to accept the notion of God and that God exists if I look at the sky and see the stars aligned to read, I am here. So you see, this stems from his inside understanding that a world in which God exists would be a hunky-bunky world. Anything can happen any moment. Also, Steven Weinberg, the famous physicist, and he is really original physicist. He has done a lot to science and particle physics. He was in a discussion, in a debate with John Polkinghorne, the theist physicist of Cambridge University. And Polkinghorne had a very strong arguments that Weinberg couldn't answer. This was in 2002 in Spain. It's on the net. You can see the whole debate. And Weinberg said, well, I agree with you, John. I'm ready to believe in God if a fiery sword all of a sudden appears in this auditorium and chops my head for my impiety. Again, he is asking God to make miracles. But God do not make miracles always. So that's why I say, this is a little bit preliminary, but I would suggest that we should change the name occasionalism into indeterminism. But we will discuss later in part 3. When we come to Ash'arites' views, I believe that here we can see, yes, the occasionalist, what so-called occasionalist expression, but again, the same roots, the same structure of thinking on natural causality, of course, that the Ash'arite is telling us that they negate causal determinism, but they assure you that there should be causal relationships. And even Al-Ghazali, in his book, Tahafut, in 17th discussion, I will come to this later, he expressed this clearly, that if you negate causal relationships altogether, you end up with books turning into, I don't know what, camels or horses, or all of a sudden. And this again will be discussed later. I should stress that Al-Baqillani clearly negated the four natural elements. Despite the dominating philosophical thinking of his time, that four elements are must in order to explain many phenomena, including medical treatments by al-akhlaq al-arba'a, العناصر الأربعة والأخلاط الأربعة والطبائع الأربعة. The four natures, four mixtures, and the four elements, basic elements. Clearly he says this is nonsense. And clearly he also refutes astrology and any effect of heavenly bodies on earth. And his argument is that these objects are not ethereal, as Aristotle is telling us and the philosophers. They are objects like the earth. And that this is also a subject for study in postgraduate, maybe also MSc students can do that. How could the Baqillani say that the moon and the sun and the celestial objects are composed of same thing as the earth? Yes, as the earth. He said, if the moon will have effect on human beings or the earth, then stones can do the same thing. How could he say that at his time? I mean, we shouldn't think of our time. It's completely different. His knowledge was limited to what was available at his time. So we should put it in context, not project our ideas. In the 17th discussion, actually, Al-Ghazali presented his views, and here what I want to say preliminary, although I will return to the subject in much more details. As I said, the first thing we should notice is that he said, Al-Ghazali said, the conjunction between what is customarily believed to be a cause and what's customarily believed to be an effect is not necessary. Note here, it is the conjunction, he said, not the connection. Although in almost all translation I have seen, it says the connection. It's not the connection. Al-Ghazali said al-iqtiran. Al-Ghazali was writing in Arabic. And he said al-iqtiran. Iqtiran means conjunction, not connection. Connection, tarabut, irtibat. Connection, if he would have said connection, then I would be suspicious that he has acknowledged any kind of causal relationship. But when saying iqtiran means two things may happen on certain reason. Whether those reasons are necessary or not is questionable. That's what he is saying. It's unnecessary, in his opinion. But then he says later that this will lead to absurdities. He refused the absurdities resulting from negating laws and order, thus affirming that there is a law and order by which the world is ruled, and this is the custom. Mustaqarrul al-'ada. Is the same meaning as Qadi Abd-Jabbar and Mu'tazili acknowledged custom. That's why people think that Al-Ghazali has two theories of causality. Theory 1 and Theory 2 in the 17th discussion. It's not the case. It's one theory. He acknowledges causal relationships, denying causal determinism or deterministic causality. Tawlid is a term used by Mu'tazilite. Tawlid was, or I throw a stone and the stone will break the glass. So the question is, have I broken the glass? Or is it the stone who broke the glass? The Mu'tazilites acknowledge that this is Tawlid, generation, caused by me, but I am not the direct cause. Direct cause is the stone breaking the glass, but I am responsible for it. So the Ash'arite was laughing and saying, one body who throws an arrow and dies before the arrow reaching that person, and then you mean to say that that man who throws the arrow is responsible while he's dead. But this is no argument, of course. Conclusion. In conclusion, I would say the following. From the above presentation of the views of Mu'tazilite and Ash'arite on the question of natural causality, it becomes clear that there is much in common between them, and there are many similarities between their arguments on negating causal determinism while acknowledging causal relationships of different sorts. I agree. There are different sorts of causal relationships. On the other hand, the so-called theory of custom or ada, which was developed by the Ash'arite, is by no means, in my opinion, by no means a theory, since it has no structure, nor it can be proven from first principles. It was an ad hoc solution to the apparent contradiction between their assumption of the absence of deterministic causality versus actual everyday experience, which indicates regularity and order in natural phenomena. However, once the principle of continuous recreation is introduced within the framework of causality, only then we can talk about fully fledged theory of custom, or fully fledged, rather, theory of causality. Only when we incorporate, in my opinion, the recreation, and this, as I said, will be done in part 2 and part 3 of my contribution. Thank you very much for listening to me all this time. And I hope now we have about 25 minutes, yes, I think, or so,
we thank Professor
to discuss.
Very much. We have about 25 minutes. That was, I think, a very thorough and very informative talk. Thank you very much. So let's see the questions. Now is it? Professor
Thank you very much. This is an illuminating presentation. In Islamic philosophy, the later terminology is very much established in English. But in the early period, especially the 3rd century, because that's where we have been traveling so far, the terms are not so much established.
Yes.
The translations, like I am having a problem with your translation of i'timad, and even Qada, really. Because when you translate as nature, how are you going to translate tabi'a? You cannot make a distinction between the two. And that is why I had a hard time to understand the notion of i'timad. If you can elaborate on that a little bit further. Thank you very much.
Well, as for طبعا طبيعة, the متكلمون, especially whether Ash'arite and Mu'tazilite, they use this in the same meaning. الطبع والطبيعة, because they had no separate entity as طبيعة, mind you. طبيعة. They had طبع, so when it comes, so طبيعة الشيء. So طبيعة الشيء is also another noun expressing طبع. You can replace it easily with طبع الشيء. Whereas in philosophy, the two are different. Concerning i'timad, as I said, i'timad is very clear. The example is very of falling stone is very clear. When you push something, when you produce any force doing anything, then it is i'timad. When you have even, by the way, even fire.
Like a natural law?
It's not.
Is it natural because the way you describe it?
Yes.
And that is what comes to my mind, natural law. But then, of course, it's very difficult. if you translate like that, there might be problems because it may lead to determinism.
Yes, it's not natural law, you see, but it is a property that the system acquire on certain conditions. As if you are, for example, we have two examples. A stone being thrown upward, you are giving it kinetic energy in the modern terminology. So it goes upward with this kinetic energy. It's not a law. It's something that you are giving to the body. Also burning. And that's where Al-Naysaburi and Ibn Matawai were discussing in details what does burning means. The cotton is acquiring heat, and its nature, its properties will change and color from being white to black. But this is acquired. It is something which has been acquired by the cotton. Who is doing the firing itself? It's the creator. Therefore, it is indeterministic because the creator can choose to do anything he likes. He can turn the burnt cotton into red, for example, if he likes. But he never did that. Oh, this is mustaqarrul aada. You see, again, is another name. Mustaqarrul aada. Mustaqarrul aada is the law. Yes.
Established custom.
Yes. Established customs.
Thank you. Nasi?
So let me first make a comment, and I will give to Brian. I think one of the benefits of the workshop is to see what scholars from different backgrounds to think about the concepts or the terms used with the same, word, like, occasion, creation, etc. And I think representation of occasionalism is a bit different from the usual understanding of occasionalism as it is understood in the Western tradition now. Because the term occasionalism was first introduced by Kant to describe Malebranche's theory of causality. And according to that meaning given by Kant and the other scholars in that century, like Leibniz, etc., occasionalism is understood in the following way. The problem here is whether to deny efficient causality or not. I especially emphasize efficient causality because there are other types of causality which are not in question to be denied or not. For example, occasionalism introduced the term occasional causality to replace efficient causality. The point is whether God is the only direct cause of every event or object in the world. If you say that, then you are occasionalist. If you say God is the creator of everything, but introduce some secondary causality that, for example, have its own causality, then it is not occasionalism. And the point of determinism or indeterminism debate in relation to occasionalism is the following. Occasionalists allow miracles. There are certain regularities in nature, but God can create something irregular. That's possible. However, since they use the term occasional cause, this is very important to understand occasionalism. Occasional cause means God creates events on certain occasions. For example, God creates the burning of cotton on the occasion of fire, not on the occasion of water. This implies that occasionalism presupposes a certain regularity in creation rather than arbitrariness. And in that sense, there are two significant theses of occasionalism as presented by Malebranche. First, God is the sole causal agent if we talk about efficient causality, the only direct cause. And second, the events and the objects in the world are occasional causes for certain other events and objects, as fire is the occasional cause for the burning of cotton. But still, God is the only efficient cause. There are two types of causality here, and all the miracles are allowed, they are not so likely. Thank you.
Well, my comment on this, Dr. Nazif, is that, in my opinion, we still have room to revise our understanding. We are not bound to the understanding of the classical philosophers, European philosophers, of course. They have different understanding, but how Muslim mutakallimun understood the situation is as I'm presenting it. If you don't like to call it occasionalism, that's what I am calling it. I'm saying that we should not call it occasionalism, for example. But it's not because I am presenting occasionalism in a different terminology. No, because the Muslim understanding of cause and effect, in my opinion, cannot be put in context on this framework, perhaps, of Kant and Malebranche. Not necessarily. Not necessarily. They may have misunderstood things. Tell you why. You say God creating other things through which causal effect is taking place. The question is not the occasion of fire and not the occasion of water which burns. The question is, would fire always burn cotton or not? This is clear in Al-Ghazali, the 17th discussion. He said, وَنَحْنُ نُجَوِّزُ أَنْ يُلْقَى نَبِيٌّ أَوْ إِنسَانٌ فِي النَّارِ فَلَا يَحْتَرِقُ. We allow for a person to be thrown into fire, but he will not burn. This is the question. The difference is in defining causality for Muslims, their zeal was to know or was to describe the thing itself doing, whether it is created by God or not created by God. This is something else. So if the cause is created by God and it's doing independently on its own, affecting the event, or then this is deterministic. Always. See, always. That is why Muslims denied causality in the philosophical understanding, because they denied the determinism of a cause. They said causes exist, but they are indeterministic. This is a new view, if you might call it. It's a new look to all subject. We should look from the deterministic, indeterministic point of view.
Thank you. Any other? Professor. Okay, go on and then Professor.
Thanks for all the wonderful detail there. Amid the detail, though, I got a bit lost about your three different causal relations. So adherence, generation, and custom. So what I was hoping you could do is sort of give me some examples that would, like in my mind, clarify which are which. So you gave the examples of the motion of the stone and the burning of cotton. That was supposed to be adherence?
Adherence.
That's right, okay. Okay, so could you give me some examples?
Generation, breaking a glass. I throw a stone on a glass and the glass is broken.
That's generation.
Yeah, this is a cause generated by the kinetic energy, if you like, in a modern term, to break the glass.
Okay, like in my mind, those all seem like the same kind of...
Or kill a person by an arrow. No, it's not the same. Tawleed, generation, is mainly by a creature.
Okay.
Conscious.
Okay, so the difference...
Conscious creature.
Okay,
See?
okay. Okay, good, that's a good rule. And what about
If,
custom?
if you like, yes, that's why it is allocated tawleed for the action of man, human being, mainly.
I see, okay,
Because you know these terms is important to differentiate between the two. For clerical, for Sharia law, it goes directly. How you will define the Sharia law then?
so generations are the kind of acts that can be blamed on someone.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, last one, custom, what?
Custom is actually recognition that there is a law and order, but this law and order is not always there. It's most probable. Custom is the most probable expected events. This is custom.
So how would I know whether, I see something, how would I know it falls?
You
under
cannot,
custom?
you would only expect with high probability. With high probability that if I shoot a person, he will be hurt.
Okay, so it's,
With high probability. But then you should keep in mind there is a very, very low probability that the custom might be breached. That's why it's called custom. If it's breached, the custom is broken. But this doesn't happen every day.
Can we trust God? It always happens like this.
We can't trust God to follow the custom again, but again, to certain limit. That is why you see the Arabs and most of the Muslims, not the Arabs, but mainly the Arabs, they always say, Inshallah. You tell him, we meet at 12:30, and he says, Inshallah. What does Inshallah mean? If God wills. If God will. Why? Why is saying that? He should come at 12:30.
Even
He should be committed to come. This, inshallah, is something uncertain.
but isn't that the motion of the stone and the burning of cotton, aren't those examples of that?
According to the Islamic understanding, it could change.
Professor Sahar,
It's not. It's also inshallah.
Definitely. If it's a
That's it.
follow-up on that, your question.
Not exactly a follow-up. So there was someone before me that, I mean, when you.
Then Professor Brandon.
Professor.
Thank you. This actually does kind of follow up on Doug's question, because when you say that these two schools deny causal determinism, I'm thinking about it from my perspective as an historian of 17th century philosophy. You deny causal determinism, so presumably you're denying causal determinism means that you deny that there's a necessary connection between causes and effects. And for someone like Descartes, say, the question would be then, if you deny causal determinism, what then are you saying about the regularity and immutability of God? That is, what do you then say about God's nature? Are you saying that God is possibly not immutable? That God can change? That the laws of nature themselves change? So I guess what I'm really asking you about is, what do you mean by that?
Yeah, this is a good question because it distracts my attention to the Shiite mutakallimun. This very same conclusion that you may have arrived at was arrived at by the Shiite mutakallimun, some, not all of them, who said that this could mean that God is immutable. Therefore, al-bida, it's called al-bida. And they allowed that God may change his wish or will. Normally, his will is that the bullet will hit me and I'll get hurt if you shoot me. But then sometimes it doesn't. Then God has changed is low. But the Ash'arite, or most of the Sunni mutakallimun believes, including Mu'tazila, that this is a custom. And God is free to, although it's improbable, very low probability. Ghazali made it clear that this is a low probability event to breach the custom. Yes, thank you.
Okay, in my reading, in the Mu'tazili school, both, or there is natural determinism, causal determinism, both in acts produced by human beings and in acts produced by God. In other words, both in Tawheed and in I'timad. And this is why. With regard to Tawheed, I mean, the favorite example of is the archer. So the archer throws or shoots.
The archer, yes.
Yeah, shoots an arrow. Now, the arrow, there's motion in the arrow, that's an accident. And the accident is regenerated at each moment. And then, and that's naturally, sorry, I wouldn't use the word natural. Natural is problematic. But that's the generation of motion at successive moments is determined. I mean, there's no, the Mu'tazili would say that must happen. I mean, it cannot be otherwise. If an archer throws an arrow, it will move until it hits the target, and all the sequence of events what is determined. There's no way things can be otherwise. So that's causal determinism in Tawheed. As to I'timad, now yes, the Mu'tazila speak of what I render as the normal course of events. They say that God sustains the normal course of events. But I would say that God is under an ethical obligation to sustain the normal course of events in Mu'tazilism. And therefore, the normal course of events is determined. So, whenever you have fire touching a piece of cloth, it will burn. Burning will occur.
Correct.
Now that's the Mu'tazila would say this is our normal course of events, but God is under an ethical obligation to sustain this course of events. And therefore, there is an indirect determinism here. God cannot change this unless there's a good reason to do so, for him to do so. Such as, for instance, if there's a prophet here and he says, well, I'm going to, put fire against this piece of cloth and it will not burn, and this will prove my prophecy, then God will suspend the normal course of events. And he will have a good reason to do so, to do this. So there is an indirect determinism involved, I would argue, in this case also, and this is excellent. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ayman. Actually, you are right. And in essence, it is in this ethical, it's good that you brought this point, the ethical obligation. In fact, they don't call it obligation, perhaps for politeness, but they say كتب على نفسه كتب على نفسه أن يكون كذا وكذا. But then, if you go to the same argumentation and discussion in the subject, you say it directly leads to the question of knowledge of God. It's very much connected, this question, that God determined to follow his sunnah. سنة الله ولن تجد لسنة الله تبديلا. That this goes to the question, or related, very much related, to the knowledge of God. And here we go into another area which is called, as you know, Jalil al-Kalam. Is the other section of Kalam. It's not the natural Kalam, it is the divine Kalam, or the Ilahiyat. They have very much diverse views about whether this mean to say that the i'timad itself is deterministic or not. And it's a question to be studied, definitely, in my opinion. It's good that you bring to my attention this point. I have to make more work on it. Yes, thank you.
Please, and then there was another one. Okay, so please go on, and then.
Thank you very much, Professor. It's nice to see you. It's very inspiring presentation. I have two questions, but maybe one question.
Yeah, we have to be a bit brief, but please go on.
Okay, thank you very much. What do you mean by saying that Jawhar substance is abstract entity? As far as I know, Mutakallimun made a differentiation between philosophical or Aristotelian aspects of substance, which is completely mujarrad, abstract entity. On the other hand, Mutakallimun's substance has a primary quality, which is called mutahayiz, which makes it very concrete or space occupied entity. Can we make a clarification about
Yeah.
this? The second question is that you said that Mutakallimun agree with a kind of causal relationship, which is direct causal relationship. God directly creates everything, and the system continues by interventions of God. For example, I am holding this pen, they are thinking like a physicist. What about my cells? What about atoms? What about molecules, atoms, protons, neutrons? Maybe they produce only kind of forces, and they think that everything is discontinuous or discrete structure, and we need a cause from outside of the universe, supernatural cause, to explain the occurrence of the elements. But on the other hand, it's very interesting that Mu'tazila are able to develop a suitable knowledge for scientific explanation by introducing Tawleed Itimad. On the other hand, all agree that they accept direct causal law, but Mu'tazila can develop a kind of relationship. Why Ash'arites cannot develop this kind of relationship? Thank you.
Yeah. Well, the reason why the Jawhar is abstract, more than one reason. First of all, if you go back to Harry Wolfson, in his book, The Philosophy of the Kalam, you see that he has devoted more than 20 pages to discuss the question of magnitudinous of the Jawhar. The Islamic atom, or the Jawhar rather, not the, it has no magnitude. Second, you find that the Al-Juwayni has mentioned this, Imam Al-Juwayni, that some Mu'tazilite says it is magnitudeless. But then he says, well, وَلَهُ قَدْرٌ غَيْرَ أَنَّ لَيْسَ لِقَدَرِهِ بَعْضٌ. You see, it has a sort of quantity or a magnitude rather, but this magnitude has no portions, no parts, because it is the indivisible part. Third, when you see that they're talking about tahayyuz, by the way, tahayyuz is not occupation of space. Tahayyuz is different from, many people think when we say tahayyuz, it means occupying a space. It doesn't. It's not. And this also was discussed under this title, معنى التحيز, the meaning of تحيز, by Al-Juwayni in Al-Shamil في أصول الدين. About 4 pages discussing تحيز. And then he says at the end, وأفضل ما يقال في التحيز أنه الوجود نفسه. The best that we can say about تحيز is that it exists. But he refutes the occupation of space, by the way, because space is عرض, as you know, and this will cause two problems. I will leave the discussion of the other point in the analysis, if you may allow me to do so, because I have to discuss many originating principles or contributing views to answer your second question. Tomorrow, inshallah. Tomorrow.
So we thank you very much, Professor Altaie, for this wonderful presentation and the question and answer sessions. If there are other people with questions, I am one of them. We have a lot of time to discuss them over lunch. Thank you again.
Thank you very much indeed.
Coffee and tea is ready. Just